welcome and Hul today is
Bonjour.
on the eve of this 165th anniversary of the Santal Hul. It is my great pleasure to invite and welcome Dr. Daniel Rycroft to talk to us. Uh, he is a teacher of art history at the University of East Anglia, and he has done his research on Santal Rebellion. He has a book and many more things which we will explore while we talk to him. But in the beginning, Daniel, welcome and Hul Juhar.
Bonjour. Thank you, Joy. It's great to be able to reconnect with you. We worked together so closely back in the years 2003, 4, and 5 on our documentary programs, which have seen some good airings on YouTube. So I think people are free to watch these programs concerning the memory of the rebellion. And that was a very important moment for me to engage what was then ISWAX and other organizations like ASECA, there's the ICITP and so forth. So back in 2005, the activist forum for Adivasis was very well connected across India, as well connected internationally. And I think the work that we did was also contributing to the visibility of the Adivasi issues, both within India and outside India. And I came to the concept of this Adivasi memory from some more historical work I did before that. So the book that you referred to is called Representing Rebellion. And the main focal point in terms of rebellion, meaning anti-colonial rebellion in the 19th century, was the Santal Hul. And coming from the UK, I was very interested in the complicity of the East India Company, not only with the suppression of the Hul, but with the broader perception of Santals, as they were then known, Santal, back in the mid-19th century, just to get a sense of whether and how there was any responsiveness to this big event in colonial and anti-colonial history in the UK. And so I did some documentation work around the depiction of the rebellion, more so the suppression of the rebellion by members of the East India Company, looking into how they managed to get that sense of cultural power and authority whereby they could show readers of journals like the Illustrated London News their view, and it was a highly politicized view, obviously. So all of this required some documentation and some unpacking.
I remember when we first met in 2005, when you came for your doctoral research and you expressed your opinion that you would be making a movie and inviting us to be a part of it. And during that course, I remember it was such a wonderful opening for Santal like me to have left that portion of research unexplored for that period of lifetime, that we had never thought of this kind of avenues that we could take up. And with your intervention, I very strongly remember that your formation of 150-year celebration forum, which led at that time to form now a national level organization called Gota Bharat Siddhakarna Hulbaisi. And it was all your recommendation that why not the Santals do a Padyatra or a march from Dumka to Bhognadi. So calling you today was just to take you back to 15 years later when you started and when you shared this idea amongst us, and how this small idea has become such a big event today that we have not.
It's lovely to reflect on this, and I think more so should thank you and also the colleagues at the Hulbaisi for bringing their wisdom, their energy, their power into play, because I mean, I think to some extent it's a partnership. To some extent there's a catalyst effect that happens when different people bring various ideas to the table. And back in 2005, you're absolutely right, there was this big new intervention in terms of bringing together the Santal, the Adivasi diaspora to Dumka, and then going from Dumka all the way through places like Katakund, off to Bognadi, which I think since the 1960s has been the center point for a lot, if not all, of the Hul memorials. So just piecing together how we got to that point in 2005, following on from the research that I did on the historic facets of the rebellion, the project changed. I was involved in a new project. Then I was at the University of Sussex. And the project then was geared around the memorialization of the Hul. So the work of statues, of songs, of poetics, of politics, in maintaining this very rich, but also very highly problematic memory of the Hul, given that the Hul had been suppressed really very brutally. There was a lot of counterinsurgency, many displacement measures, a great loss of memory as well. So just in terms of that research project, looking into the statuary, working with some of your colleagues at IceWax, it became very evident to us that the statues are really half of the story, maximum half of the story. The other half being what happens at the statues, the memories, the aspirations, the qualities of being Santal, being Adivasi, being human, being part of this rich legacy that come through when people are engaged in that space of interaction, that space of retelling about what happened in Bognadi and Panchketia and Barhet and many other places in what became known as the Santal Parganas after the Hul. And so with your input, with the input of some of your colleagues like Dr. Marandi, we together came to this notion that we should try and record the voices as much as the statues themselves. So to record the process of remembering. And this rich tapestry of remembrance and memory and Adivasi heritage comes into play in the film Hul Sandes, which is the culmination of that project. And I think viewers of Hul Sandes will get a good sense of the multi-layered engagement with the Hul, how to some extent it permeates the minds and consciousness of very, very poor, very, very disadvantaged villages outside of Barhet, but also how it permeates the historic consciousness of some of the politicians, some of the intellectuals, both within the Adivasi and also outside of the Adivasi community. And think then of what happens in 2005 when this big culmination of a diaspora returning to the Santal Parganas happens again. That offered many new perspectives. So how figures like Sidhu Murmu, Kanu Murmu became quite famous or legendary in the minds of, for example, Santals now living in Bangladesh, or Santals now living in Nepal and places far away from Dumka. So there was this reassembling, which you in fact led in terms of its documentation back in 2005. And the film that came from that conversation, no doubt linked to the earlier conversation, is called Hul Johar, a very apt name for the film and for the event. And that then provides the basis for the Padayatra, it seems, because everybody was welcoming the returning Santals from places like Calcutta, Bangladesh, Nepal, many places outside of the Santal Parganas. A big head of steam got together as people congregated and joined the Padayatra. That was 2005, and my understanding is that for most years since then, some kind of Padayatra has been taking place. the Hul has been quite influential in that.
Oh yes, rightly you have mentioned and taken back in our memory lane how we were involved in the filmmaking and how it did develop a sense of a new sense of responsiveness to show our gratitude to our forefathers or to our ancestors. In fact, 2005 was a great beginning for not for only people who are engaged in this filmmaking or in this research, but to a lot of Santals, because after that, I see that there has been a huge change in the mentality of people, in the mentality of students. You remember we were asking questions to students of class 10 in Dumka, and they said while filmmaking that they only know about Sidhu and Kanu, nothing much about them. But now I see a greater understanding and consciousness of our youth and children. Uh, it's aptly because the beginning was 2005. This 150 year celebration was the benchmark or the threshold of the new beginning of a new consciousness of Santal history and the modern Santals reactions or how they take our ancestors' gratitude or a show of thankfulness to them. I'm sure you must be following our activities and the activities of the Hulbaisi that till date it has not missed a chance to skip this Padyatra even for a year. And let me tell you, even during this pandemic, the Hulbaisi yesterday flagged off a march with fewer people, naming it COVID response uh, awareness Rath Yatra. But I'm sure and everybody understand that within each and everyone engaged in that COVID response team is going to pay homage to the our ancestors even during this lockdown and where we are not allowed to gather. So yeah, it is to thank.
Very interesting, Joy. I was very pleased this morning to receive some digital photographs from my friend and colleague Duni Soren of that event, and I think the Hul is blessed with a good quantity of highly qualified doctors.
Yes, yes, and I'm sure you must be getting all those pictures by now, and the Padyatra is already in progress, and it may not look like the earlier ones, but definitely the message is clear that because of the this lockdown or the pandemic, it is not happening in that big form. But nonetheless, it just has remembering Hul today, and how do you feel? You are also in the lockdown or unlocking process there in India, and your not so frequent visits after 2005 to Santal Parganas. Do you miss us?
Hugely, yes. It's a very kind of mixed feeling, if you like, because back in 2003-4, when we were preparing the documentary Hul Sandes, we got a chance to have some very close and sustained interactions with the descendants of Sidhu Murmu in the village Bhognadi. And these interactions had a very great impact on me, and hopefully that comes through in the film. And one of the reasons why it impacted me so much was because I had learned as a historian a little bit about how and where the rebellion took place. I had become familiar with this idea of the Damin Yiko, which is the area that was governed in a particular way by the East India Company, very much obviously to the detriment of many of the indigenous inhabitants. And so when the rebellion started, the whole meaning, the whole kind of human geography of the Dominica changed. For example, the interactions between Sidhu Murmu, Kanu, others, and their forefathers, their elders, would have taken place at the very same spot that we were having the interactions with the descendants, and the statues are there in their household. People also named Sidhu Murmu, Kanu Murmu, part of that family tree. And so to be in the presence of Sidhu Murmu and others through not only their family, but like you say, this kind of social responsiveness, this idea that we are indebted to them, that we must think about how their program has only become partially fulfilled because obviously it was curtailed quite dramatically. That sense of social responsibility impacts different people differently. I think it might impact you differently from me. It might impact Dr. Duni Soren differently from you. I think depending on where we are, what our expertise is, what we can offer, I think just to a large extent our social responsibility would need to be channeled in accordance of those perspectives, those qualities. And so not being able to bring that into play directly now due to the COVID lockdown or due to kind of personal changes does sort of hang rather heavy at times. But I'm involved now in a different program of social responsibility that's trying to engage academic organizations, for example, universities, both within India and the UK, in a joint program on what we call university social responsibility. And so one element of university social responsibility is to enable our curriculum, enable our institutions, enable what we can offer to become more widely accessible. I think in the Indian context, for example, to members of Adivasi and Dalit communities, for example, where we find some people might argue that it's some sort of neo-colonial idea around linguistic hegemony of some of the dominant languages at the expense of some of the Adivasi languages. Other people looking at it from another side may think of all this in terms of affirmative actions, the rights and wrongs of affirmative action policies and so forth. So it's an unresolved situation, this idea of university social responsibility. And so we're establishing a new dialogue with universities across India on what we think our shared responsibilities are. And some of this does relate back actually to the work that we were doing together, because the work that we were doing back in 2005 was, we broadly conceptualized it in terms of the Adivasis' human development. So not so much an economic development agenda, but a human development agenda to find out why, you know, the Hul still now persists in terms of the difficulties which people had faced, not being able to express their memories of the Hul openly. Think of what Bitya Hembram was saying about her personal memory of it being curtailed by the earlier generations, them not being able to speak openly to her about the Hul and its history for fear of reprisals. So a lot of this comes back really to a fairly fundamental human right around the freedom of expression, the freedom to communicate ideas. And so if together, me and you and others have in a small way generated some kind of platform where we can revisit the Hul openly without fear of reprisal, then I think that can be seen to have been a good thing. And therein comes a broader quality, which is a university project delivering some kind of public good. And so, you know, these are all channels or ideas that can be further embellished, further deepened. But broadly speaking, the premise was there back then in 2005.
Yeah, and it's very heartening to know that the premises that was set long back has its off-roots going on, and I'm sure it will continue to go a long way as long as we live, because these memories of the Hul it's not only part of our life, and it's a part of our heritage, and it is our uh, duty to do certain things that would actually strengthen these kind of ethos for our own people. And I'm glad that your new initiative with the universities will be very helpful. And to also remind you that the engagement of our organic people, people from the villages, the Maji Hadams and the Parganas, should not be overshadowed, and they need respect, and equal amount of their voices should be has to be there. And I'm sure you are an expert in that, and you have never missed. I remember that it was your priority to have people from the ground, and not merely only the experts doing the decision making process. Uh, Anyhow, on this 165th anniversary, we are not happy, we are not sad, mixed emotions. Uh, what would be your message to the Santals of this of the world?
It's really a question, actually, which is, again, referring back to the Manji Haram institution that you mentioned, which is, if we can make that institution stronger, how can it help Santals, Adivasis more broadly to fashion a self-confidence in their own democracy? Citizenship for people historically marginalized or dispossessed has been hard to come by, but there have been some sociologists in the Indian context who have sought to look under that, under the skin of that, into this concept of a kind of a communitarian ethos that's expressed in different ways by different institutions. And the capacity for Adivasi democratic institutions to persist is there, but to what end? So how to strengthen that? And when it is curtailed or ignored or overlooked, let's think about why that's so, and how we can develop some good knowledge partnerships and some knowledge exchanges with all kinds of institutions, whether civil society organizations or higher education organizations, schools. There are many interested parties in responding to this question about Adivasi democracy. Let us find that space and deepen it on the occasion of the 160th anniversary of the Hul and onwards.
This is important because as we just witnessed a large coming back of so-called migrant brothers and sisters from all over the country to our Jharkhand state. I'm sure you are aware of this through news channels and the newspapers. Uh, the government actually is having a big challenge to include them in the rural economy, and there is a good chance to revive the rural economy, which I call it an Adivasi economy, because now we have our own government. We say Abua Disam Abua Raj. That was the slogan of the Jharkhand movement, and now you are aware that the Jharkhand Mukti Morcha is in charge of the Jharkhand government, and it has shown tremendous respect for our brothers and sisters during this whole 3 months of pandemic, where migrant people, laborers coming back from different cities, they died on the way while coming. They walked miles, and there are hundreds of examples you would find in the BBC news if you look into and would want to know. And despite all that, the willingness of the people in power now also is a positive point for Adivasis. Unlike in the previous times, for the past 20 years, Jharkhand has never experienced this kind of a pro-Adivasi approach by a chief minister. Uh, so this is also a positive note, and a good feeling for all people like us, and who are of community thinking that every life matter, and the migrant people who are brothers and sisters who have been working elsewhere, since now they have come back, and they need something and to live on, and the greatest responsibility lies on the organic institutions, the Maji Pargana system, and that's where our leaders, our traditional leaders role come into being. And many organizations are now aiming and putting up recommendations to the government that we should have a policy in which, and this is a great chance to revive the rural economy, and 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 that would be a very good initiative on the part of Adivasis to be self-reliant in our own villages, which has been we totally distracted so far, and we have been asked to follow the mainstream, God knows where it is, and everybody moving to cities and towns in somewhere for your own bread and butter, but this season has brought maximum number of people back to their homes, and I'm sure they're not willing to go back uh, to where their workplaces were. And I see the role of these traditional institutions becoming much stronger now, welcoming their own people, uh, and it is not that difficult to cater to the needs of the people. If you only, you should have the will to do that, and now it is we are having some good hopes that these traditional institutions will have some role to play in bringing about change to with the life of our own brothers and sisters who have come back from these cities. Uh, so then it was lovely to talk to you, and your uh, thank you for your time, and I'm sure uh, you are missing all of this Santal Pargana of the Santal Bhognadi, the institutions you work with, the people, and I'm sure this video, as we would broadcast it, many of us friends will be happy to see your face almost after 10 to 15 years, those who have not met you for long, and I'm sure we'll keep in touch, and and and
Definitely.
and it is my duty to show my gratitude to the path you have shown to all of us, that is bringing good fruits till date, and keeping us happy and alive till now. So thank you, Dan, so much for talking to us, and a very big Hul Johar
Hul
from all of
Johar.
us.
Hul Johar. Thank
Thank
you, Joy. And please pass on my love, respect, and best wishes to all of our mutual friends across Dunka and Santal Parganas and beyond.